بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Um, Yesterday or the day before, I was watching a podcast between Muhammad Hijab and Jake, the Muslim metaphysician, and I found it very insightful. And I wanted to reflect on a specific aspect of this discourse, which relates to addiction. So, for those of you who don't know, there has been a back and forth between Jake and Daniel Haqiqatjou, kind of refuting each other and having online kind of an online spat, which is related to many theological issues, but some of it is related to kind of alliances with the Shia, and whether that's uh, permissible and theological issues around Velayat Taqwaniya and other things. Anyway, that's not the focus of what I want to talk about. So during the discourse or the podcast, Muhammad Hijab was asked a question around kind of like create being an influencer and creating content and kind of the risks, etc. And I found it really, subhanallah, mashallah, Allah Mabarak. He was very honest, and he mentioned something which I don't think many people are aware about or talk too much about, and this is the issue around what we would term as digital addiction. So, mashallah, Allah Mabarak, there are so many brothers online, celebrity duat, I would say, in the sense that it's not a derogatory thing, but in terms of people who have, thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions plus followers. And we know the most kind of, famous, like, for example, Muhammad Hijab, Hamza Zorzes, Jake, Daniel Hakikachu, etc. There's a lot of people online that, Allah Mabarak, are producing great work. But although there's a lot of advantages, there's also risks and disadvantages which we need to be aware of. And I was thrilled that Akhi Muhammad Hijab mentioned this, something which he's been working on. And he relates this to an experience of a physical nature. So he had some physical health issue, was put on strong opioids, and then became dependent on those opioids. And after some time, he mentioned that he tried to stop them suddenly and developed withdrawal symptoms, wasn't well, and after discussion with his physician, was advised that he should gradually taper it off, and it took him for around 4 to 6 months to actually come off the opioids. And then he mentioned that, subhanallah, like when he produces content, he frequently will spend a lot of time, kind of reviewing the response to that his content in terms of the number of likes, what are the comments, the number of views, and this he mentioned that kind of like can take over some the life of an influencer. And definitely he mentioned that he found that he was spending a lot of time focusing on, okay, how many likes have I got, what are the comments, and if there's negative comments, it really affected him. So he was able to reflect on that, and subhanallah, I think it's a really great point. So for me as an addiction psychiatrist, there's a lot of work now, especially I would say in the last 5 6 years, looking at digital addiction. So we know that addiction to substances like opioids or crystal meth causes a surge of dopamine to be released, which is the pleasure hormone or pleasure neurotransmitter to be released in the reward centers of the brain, which gives you that high or great feeling, and that's then develops into your brain kind of craving that pleasurable experience through repeated use of that drug. um, and then so that's how addiction develops. It's a brain disease. It's related to dopamine, the pleasure hormone. There's research that shows, for example, if the baseline release of dopamine is say around 100%, use of certain drugs can, especially intravenous drugs like heroin, can blow that out of the water by an increase of by 4,500%, for example. So we know this is a well-established neurobiology of addiction. What's really interesting, subhanAllah, is that the work that's being done now around digital addiction shows that the same pathways and the same neurotransmitter dopamine is involved. So, digital addiction is now something which is recognized as a global health issue. So there's Dr. Lee. He's a pioneer. He is a key figure in the research being done on digital addiction. So what is digital addiction? Well, basically, it's a comprehensive term that encompasses a long-standing and emerging categories of internet addiction, gaming addiction, social media addiction, and other media addictions. Meta-analysis revealed that around a quarter, or 25.89% of adolescents, suffer from internet addiction. The American Medical Association survey said up to around 15% of adolescents may be digital addicts. And a national study published in Norway reported that the prevalence of problematic digital games around 4%, and the addiction rate was 0.6%. In 2013, the American Medical Psychiatric Association included internet gaming disorder, both online and offline, in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, version 5, to provide diagnostic criteria, and called for further research. Moreover, the WHO classified video game addiction as a mental disorder, either online or offline, in the 11th edition of the ICD. So digital addiction has now become a serious global health issue. And the escalating prevalence of studies investigating digital addiction um, and its detrimental impact on human brain structure and functionality has been noticeable in recent years. So, subhanAllah, the research shows that you get changes in the brain when you become addicted to digital devices or gaming. And those changes mirror the changes we see in addiction to other substances, for example. So there was a scoping review that was done by Dr. Lee, published at the December 2023, complying with Prismac extension for such reviews. And basically, it amalgamated around 28 studies spanning a decade, and examined the influence of assorted forms of digital addiction on the brain of children and adolescents. What they found was that digital addiction exerts a harmful effect on the structure and the functionality of the brains of children and adolescents. And the prefrontal lobe, which is a prefrontal cortex within the frontal lobe, is the region most consistently reported as impacted across all research. Subhanallah. So this is the same thing that we see in normal addiction with substances. So you can imagine let's say we'll use Muhammad Hijab as an example, because he mentioned it himself that this is something he's working on. So say he creates some content and then he publishes it on variable digital platforms. Then he will want to see the response. And when he sees the views increasing, say there's hundreds and thousands of views, likes, thousands of likes, and then comments, praising the work or praising the video, etc., that will cause a surge of dopamine to be released, and give him a pleasurable experience. Okay. Any negative comments he will become hypersensitive to that, which is what he mentioned himself. So because the brain has experienced such a positive experience in terms of dopamine surge, then the brain will then seek that again, and this is what we call craving. So you can imagine that, okay, then he'll want to produce another video, and then again another video and another video, and keep analyzing the data. And subhanAllah, now it's very easy. YouTube, etc., other platforms provide what do we say, real-time data in terms of views, likes, the duration of views, the demographics. So this then becomes spirals out of control very quickly, especially for people like, for example, Muhammad Hijab and other Duat who are very famous, because of the number of followers they have. They're looking at the response to their content, and it can become an addiction where it takes over their lives in terms of the amount of time that they're spending on creating content, the amount of time they're spending on analyzing their content, and then kind of reflecting on the positive comments, and ruminating on the negative comments, and then maybe getting into problems in their personal life, family life, because of neglect of certain responsibilities, etc. And I guess it's much more challenging, especially for those brothers and sisters who have no other kind of source of income, and they're using content creation as a way to source income. So it can very quickly spiral out of control. So subhanAllah, I thought it was really, subhanAllah, something to reflect on. And I've discussed this with my brother and friend Gabriel Romani and Sheikh Tim Humble, that this is something that we need to warn people about, not just content creators, but even adults and kids. And with the advent of TikTok and shorts, subhanallah, the brain is being bombarded with content which is very short, which basically causes massive surge of dopamine to be released into the reward centers of the brain. And so then very quickly you're kind of switching from a very short video to another one, to another one, to another one. And before you know it, you maybe spent 3 4 5 hours just sitting scrolling, on your phone or your tablet, iPad, etc. Just viewing content, because you're getting that dopamine surge, and then it becomes very very difficult to distance yourself from that. So what Muhammad Hijab mentioned is that he realized that this was becoming an issue for him, like an addiction, and he tried to just get rid of it, but you have to taper it, like he did with his opioids. You, for example, you one way to do it is to analyze and keep a journal of how much time you're spending per week. Say if you're a content creator, if you're spending 50 hours on content creation, just as a ballpark figure, or just to kind of provide some input, and then say 20 hours analyzing the data. So 70 hours, then if you then kind of reflect on that. So then you can do a plan, say over 6 months, where every week, so week two, you may want to reduce it by 10 hours a week, so 60 hours, and then 50 hours, and 40 hours, and 30 hours. So gradually taper it off, because if you go cold turkey, I think many people have tried that from digital devices. You might feel withdrawal symptoms, like feel irritable, anxious, sleep disturbance, maybe even headaches, and then you might come back to it even stronger. So the effect of the drug or the digital addiction might even be stronger. So it's much wiser to gradually, you know, wean yourself off. Subhanallah, this is something that we do in addiction treatment. What about intervention? So there has been some work done, again by Dr. Lee. So, for example, there was a scoping review that was published, that looked at 17 studies published between 4 years, 2018 to 2022. And most interventions for digital addiction in children and adolescents were CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT based interventions, which can improve anxiety, depression, and symptoms of digital addiction. And CBT is something that we use for various disorders. And basically, it's cognitive behavioral therapy, where you break down a behavior or an addiction into thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and they all are interconnected. So the thought that you get, say you get the thought that you want to, quickly go online and see how many likes you have. The feelings you get from that, the pleasurable experience, or the um, let's say bad experience if there's negative comments, and then the behavior. So maybe you'll spend more time producing more content. So you kind of break that cycle, and you help the person develop more adaptive strategies. And so yeah, that's something I just wanted to reflect on, and inshallah I hope that was beneficial. It'd be great to actually connect with some of these Duat like Muhammad Hijab and others, if they want to have a discussion around this, and how we should really talk about it, because the first step is to recognize that you have an issue. So this thing around, these very, mashallah, popular Muslim influencers, and the risk of digital addiction because of the dopamine surge, is something that needs to be talked about, and we need to raise awareness about it. And then think about how we can help brothers and sisters address this issue. So until next time, I hope that was beneficial. This is your brother, Dr. Abu Isa. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.